Hi, this is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com, DevOps TV, here with our last interview of Does San Francisco 2016, and we saved the best for last, Adrian Cockroft.
Thank you very much.
Adrian, welcome.
Okay.
So we've got Matt Hines with us from our DevOps.com staff, and we have been waiting for you literally just walked off stage with the closing keynote, if you will, or the closing presentation of the event. Adrian, your talk or your presentation today was around talent. And why don't you tell our audience what the
Sure. So it's called Top Technical Talent Programs.
Okay.
And I wanted to, a lot of people are worried about the skills shortage, right? So what do you do about it? And some of the things that we do as we get into DevOps and cloud and all these things actually cause us to lose talent because they become visible and run away because they get offers elsewhere. So we were talking a bit about that area of what can you do to try and really keep people. So that was the main thing. And I wasn't actually the last talk. Disney were on after me.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, I know they are. So we're not interviewing them.
No, they can't talk. So you get the super cool video. So I had no slides for my talk. Actually, I had one really old slide, but I said I'm not going to try and compete. That was my opening thing was like I'm not going to try and compete with Disney for a slide deck. So so I just went on. I told some stories about things and. The journey that we're all on. I talked a bit about my new job and the sort of platform that I've had. When I was at Netflix, I was able to talk a lot about what Netflix was doing and try to explain that to people. And as we started to get more and more pull from outside, it was sort of constraining that I was really only doing things for Netflix. So I worked for the last 3 years at Battery Ventures, a VC firm in the Bay Area. And they sort of let me roam around talking to enterprises because we wanted to find out what they were doing and which portfolio startups we might want to invest in based on who was using what. So I was able to engage at a time when many enterprises were really picking it up and going for cloud and microservices and DevOps and all these things, right? And that has now segued into another change. And a few weeks ago, I joined AWS.
Yes.
And I've now got an even bigger sort of platform in some sense, and I'm still dealing with, figuring out how to deal with working at a huge company. That's my current issue.
AWS, though, is more than a huge company. It's almost like a huge company / startup, because their culture it's changing, but it's still very much a startup culture at AWS. Even, it's kind of an 800-pound gorilla,
they very effectively figured out a way to scale the company size without slowing down innovation. And that's been really apparent to see from all the time we worked with them from the Netflix side, and we're seeing it inside now. They're always looking for a good idea, we're always looking for a good idea, and is there a customer with a problem to solve that we think we can make a difference to?
Absolutely.
So that's basically it.
I want to return, though, to the subject of your session here today, and that is around the idea of talent. I had a conversation earlier with Damon Edwards around this. People are still the greatest asset of so many organizations.
Yep.
And especially in our industry, in the IT industry, people are not often treated at the level they deserve to be. It was really struck home to me. I'd started an information security company back in the early 2000s, and I was meeting with a CIO of a large Wall Street bank, talking about vulnerability management and how long it takes them to do remediations and so forth, and why they should scan more often. And the CIO frankly told me, look, I pay my remediation guy by the week. I don't care if he works nights, weekends, or anything else. Telling me you're going to give me something that allows him to work less hours, it doesn't do anything for me. And that's when I realized they don't value this gentleman's time, or the idea that if he wasn't doing that, he could do something higher value. And then on the other hand, we have the IT industry where people switch jobs like a Mexican hat dance, or to get a raise. Instead of, you used to be able to get a raise, now you just go get another job.
Yeah, so I talked a bit about that. The starting point really was that we're all on this journey, and we're figuring out how to do DevOps, and you have a bunch of engineers, and a year later they're doing talks at conferences about what they've done. They're on stage. They have open source projects to their name, all of these things are picking up, and then every recruiter in the world can find them.
Yeah.
So, and they are now a hot property. So, which is great if you're an engineer, and it's one of the reasons why people are enthusiastically going and
Into engineering, yeah.
chasing like resume bingo or whatever you call it, right? So, trying to get all the latest things on there. But if you seriously want to keep people, you have to plan this in and figure out what are you going to do to keep your critical people, and can you afford to pay them more? And if you've got a program that lets you pay people, and I talked about some of the hard to copy things that Netflix has, like mark to market pay. They figure out what they had to pay for the last few, really senior people with well-known open source projects to their name. And they pay internal people that have become that kind of person. They just move them up. And it doesn't matter what you were earning before. It's not a percentage limited thing.
Right.
It's they have to pay what they would have
Market
paid
rates
to
for
hire.
that person.
Yeah, at every end of every year, what would we have had to pay to hire you now again, right? And
that's fantastic.
It is, and it's great if you're an engineer because they end up paying really well and you end up figuring you can go learn something new and get a pay rise out of it effectively. That doesn't work at most large enterprises because they have big HR departments that prevent you from, like, they say, here you've got 4% and you have to peanut butter it across everybody is the way it looks. And maybe you give someone 6%. So given that you haven't got the carrot in financial sense, you don't have the flexibility at large companies. What you typically do have, though, is the ability to put people up an individual contributor sort of pay grade scale. And you spend typically grades and names and titles matter more at big companies.
Right.
So you can set up a distinguished engineer program, which is sort of director equivalent for individual contributors.
Right.
You can do if you get really, really hot people at the top of that, maybe you go to a fellows program, which is sort of VP equivalent. So I talked a bit about my experience of setting up and running and being part of those organizations, that kind of program at various companies and different ways you can do it.
Let me focus on that for a second. Part of the problem is, though, if you're paying your regular engineers, your good engineers, but your doers, the guys who are rolling up their sleeves and really doing it here, and you can only give them a raise of 4%, 6%, whatever it is. But we've got rock star managers who are, making triple, 4 times, 5 times what this guy's making. And, Toyota, for instance, right? Toyota's managers never win awards for Manager of the Year because the emphasis is on team and making sure the team is happy, the team is well paid, the team is functioning, the team goals are met, not the rock star, right? And maybe that's what part of the problem is we pay our rock stars like rock stars, and they're not rock stars.
Sometimes, if you're overpaying somebody, then it can be hard sometimes to sort of to shuffle them out. But the example I used was I went back to this book called The Phoenix Project, and I assumed that most people had read it at some point. And there's a character called Brent, and the example in the book is more that he's a bottleneck for getting stuff done because he's the only guy that has ever that knows how to do everything, right? And so my point really was, if you have a Brent in your organization, you need to figure out a way to turn them, take them out of that role, bump them up a level, give them enough seniority that they can say no, and give them the oversight to go fix the big problems that they've got the scope. If they stand back from firefighting, they say they know how everything works. So they can say, the real reason I'm firefighting all day is because this stuff over here is broken. But I don't have permission to fix that if my job is to firefight. Right. So you need to take the people that really know how everything works and how everything's broken, replace them with like 4 different people probably, because they're really good. You're gonna need that. Not kill the next person that tries the job. So you've got a single point of failure. So one of the examples, find the Brents in your organization, figure out who is really critical and who if you pump them up, maybe it's a stretch for them, but they could learn how to do this sort of overall architecture role or distinguished engineer or whatever, and they become the guru thought leaders for your organization. And you give them a director or whatever title.
It is, and they stop being the single point of failure, the bottleneck.
And here's my question, right? Everybody loves money, right? But it's also about opportunity.
Oh yeah.
Right. And what are some of the things that organizations can do to incent people to want to stay by challenging them or giving them the notion or real existence
Something
of
they could sink
a
their teeth
unique
into.
opportunity, right? Whether it's from a management
yeah, so
or
there's good
experimentation.
pay. I mean, the Netflix culture deck has a whole list of these. Stunning colleagues is the phrase they use, right?
Okay.
And so you're working with people, and everyone you work with is really good, right? And that happens because you've been, filtering it to have high talent density. So. And maybe if you put somebody on a pedestal and they are good, then people will gravitate towards them. And if people see them out at conferences, they act as attractors. And when you interview people interview candidates, you put your best people in the interview loop so people get to interact with that person they've heard of, right? And that person then acts as sort of a bar raiser to bring them up to the high, to sort of quality control for who you're hiring. So there's a lot of things you can do if you've got somebody who's really guru talented that was in this sort of firefighting role and can't do all those things. So that's the value. You get far more value out of them because they can leverage the value across the organization. And that helps hire and retain people, I think. But fundamentally, there's a problem I sort of pointed out, that if you incent your employees to be short-term and to be replaceable, you'll end up with people that don't care about the long-term success of your business and who keep disappearing. So if you set up the incentives right, then you get people who are long-term committed. You were talking about sort of things like the IBM Fellows program. Those people stick around for decades.
Yeah,
right.
They
They're
absolutely
very
do.
committed. They have the IBM brand. There's like some of us at Sun was like, we have the Sun logo. Someone threw us like a stick of rock, right? And the IBM people are the same way. Right.
And it's funny how
I still
other
find it hard to
organizations
use a
don't.
Windows laptop. It feels wrong.
It
Because I was
does
at Sun for so
feel
long, and it's like,
know
they're
what?
doing all this wonderful stuff in Microsoft now and whatever, but it was like, they were just like, you have it ingrained into you,
You
right?
do. I used to see that actually with HP. I used to go up to near Sacramento. I forgot the name of the town, but it was where their big printer campus was.
Yeah,
right?
Roseville.
Roseville. And the HP guys used to tell me this is where HP engineers come to breed. Right? They would actually send them there, they'd get married, and they'd spend the rest of their lives there, right? And
Yeah. Well, there are
retire.
some places where there are some parts of the country where there's like one employer in town.
Right.
Right.
And
So you get
Roosevelt's
it to the
that.
Midwest and you find, there's a town, you pick your favorite
Still a
insurance
company
company,
town.
they have a town. There's
Yeah.
Hershey's is probably the clearest example.
Sure.
But you get that, and if they contract, there's a problem, right? So it's more a family thing. They're maintaining a city's worth of employees to some extent. In the Bay Area, it's much
No.
more
But that
fungible.
does
So
explain
you're
some things.
competing with the top Bay Area employers for their top talent. And that's a different
Well,
game to
in
be playing.
today's economy too, though, people move from the Bay Area to Austin, and from Austin to Boulder, and from Boulder to Boston. There are, there's these centers where especially in tech, we see it. But Adrian, I think we're about out of time. I want to thank you for
Thank
being
you.
our last interview here. Thank you for appearing at Does, and thank you for all you do. Actually, in
Thank you.
the whole DevOps space and cloud and everything else. It's a great story.
Yeah, well, I hope that the result of my talk, some engineers get pay rises.
Well, it wouldn't be a bad thing. How about some journalists, but media people? That wouldn't be bad either. But anyway, Adrian Cockroft from Amazon Web Services, AWS. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Matt Hines, thanks for a great couple of days here doing interviews.
Real
man.
pleasure.
We
Real
killed it.
pleasure.
Yeah.
And the rest of our Pete and the rest of the engineering and sound team and video team, thank you. This is going to wrap DevOps Enterprise Summit 2016 San Francisco. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com's DevOps TV.